So my piece, Like a Broken Record for Unaccompanied Bass Clarinet, which I wrote about 2 years ago for as a part of my dissertation, has quickly become one of my most successful pieces. I have three conference and festival performances of the work coming up. In 2 months, I'll be performing the work at the NAC USA National Conference. That's the National Association of Composers USA, and that conference will be in North Georgia. In June, all the work will be performed as a part of the New Music on the Bayou Festival in Louisiana. And then in August, I'll be performing the work at Clarinet Fest in Dublin, Ireland. So it'll be getting its international premiere as well, which is very exciting. So with these conference performances coming up, um, I wanted to do a video where I kind of go through the piece and talk about how I compose the work. And this is also inspired a little bit by the YouTube legend Saad Haddad. So again, go over and subscribe to his channel for some great composition content. So let's just share. I'm going to share the PDF of the work of the score, just and then we can kind of go through it. All right, so looking through the piece, so it's called Like a Broken Record for solo bass clarinet. And this work really came about from two different goals that I had. So the first was that I'm a huge vinyl record collector. I have about a little over 400 records in my collection at the moment and always growing. And so I wanted to kind of write a piece inspired by that experience that I have, and then just this hobby that I have. And then I also wanted to use irrational meter in a way that just sort of makes sense. I kind of tried to use irrational meter in the past, and it really wasn't the right use of it. So I wanted to use it in a correct way compositionally. And so when I had the idea for this piece with some of the techniques that I wanted to use, which we'll get into as well, and then realizing that I could use a rational meter uh to sort of represent skipping of a record, it was this light bulb moment that I had to write the piece. So the first thing let's look at is this tempo marking here. So it's marked always spinning 45 RPM, and then there's the metronome mark is quarter note equals 120. So again, another thing that I wanted to implement, I wanted to go full forward with this idea. And so even the tempo markings are related to records, and in particular record speeds. So for those that have never don't know anything about vinyl records, there are typically two different speeds. There's more than that. There's like three or four speeds that are somewhat common, but there's two typical speeds that you'll see on any turntable that you get. And that's 33 RPM, which is what your standard 12-inch albums are going to spin at, and then 45 RPM, which is your singles, and then some special 12-inch records will spin at 45 because you could fit more higher fidelity if it's spinning faster. So here, we'll see when I have another section, when the tempo changes, I keep the ratios the same. So essentially, it's like we're going from 45, and then later we're going to go into 33 RPM. So let's talk about just this first page. Let's look at what we see. So this Bartok Pitts marking here, that's what I use to notate slap tongue. There's other notations that work as well, but this one is what I personally like to use because it's not, it doesn't, you can't confuse it with other techniques such as key clicks. And so that's the slap tongue, which is used to represent pops in a record. So if you think about when you put a needle on, if it passes over some dust or dirt, you're going to have that sort of pop sound. And then even this first system here, this first stave, we have so this filled in circle to the not filled in to the filled in, that is representing of full tone to air back to full tone. So this first measure is played like this. So we have the slap tongue, and then we have the full tone to air to full tone. And then that combined with the quarter tones that you see in measures 2 and 3. I'm using that to represent sort of the surface noise and distortion that you might get on a especially when you start a record before any of the music actually starts. So that's sort of the idea of this first line here. And then if you could look down further in measure 9, you'll see we have this measure of 4/6, which you might think, well, that's not really a time signature. And so that's where the irrational meter comes in. So if we think about if you haven't really dealt with a rational meter before, Adam Neely has a great video of it. I'll link that in the description as well. But essentially, instead of dividing the measure into eighth notes or quarter notes or half notes like we see with 4/4, 6/8, 2/2, what if we chose a different rhythm? Let's say we wanted to divide our measure into quarter note triplets and not have, and normally when we have quarter note triplets in the measure of 4/4, we have 6. So we're dividing our whole note into 6 equal parts. And then in this measure of 4/6, the 6 is our sixth note. That's what we're dividing our whole note into. And then our top number is how many we have of them. So a 4/6 measure has 4 quarter note triplets. So that's where the skipping comes in because we're interrupting this passage of quarter note triplets, and that's interrupted by the downbeat of the next measure. And so you'll notice with each of these measures of a rational meter, the 4/6, we have 2/6, we have 5/6, and then even later we divide our whole note into sevens with this septuplet here in measure 24. And so then we have a bar of 4/7, which is 4 septuplets in a measure. And so after on the downbeat of each one to sort of emphasize that skipping, I have the slap tongue. So imagine it like the record skips and then you immediately have a pop, which could easily happen. So at rehearsal A, we're kind of back to the beginning. So you can think of that like, well, let's say, the person playing the record notices there's something wrong. So sort of restarts, puts the needle back down, maybe wipes the record down a little bit. And then that's where rehearsal A sort of starts up again. So like I mentioned earlier, we increase the speed. So we have the septuplet instead of the sextuplet. So we have this measure of 4/7, 5/7, 6/7, and that keeps going on. And then we also slow it down. So now we have this measure of quintuplets, quarter note quintuplets. So now we have a measure of 4/5, measure of 3/5, 2/5. So now we have 2 of these quintuplet notes in the measure. And then again at B, we have that opening motive again. But then we go into the spectral multiphonic. So let's talk about the spectral multiphonic. So the spectral multiphonic is a really cool effect where you finger a fundamental note. So in this case, it's a low D, which is the third lowest note on my bass clarinet. And then I will just release the pressure from the jaw. So I'll just lower my bottom lip a little bit. And so that'll split the note. And what you get is sort of the different overtones that naturally occur with that low D. So that's why I call it the spectral multiphonic. Other people have different names for them. In this particular case, if I'm not manipulating anything in the oral cavity and I'm just playing the note, I call that a spectral multiphonic. So going into rehearsal C, now I'm using what I call a spectral glissando or glissandi. And that's what happens when I start with the multiphonic, and then I manipulate my oral cavity to, in this case, raise the overtones that are kind of being emphasized. And so other works that I've studied will often have the performer do it a little slower so that you can really hear the glissando like that. But I noticed that if you do it fast, it kind of sounds like a record scratch. So in this case, I even mark it down in the score that you're mimicking a record scratch, and that's what happens this whole section. And so the reason why I only have this technique in this section is I wanted to introduce it so that's really kind of gets ingrained in the audience's mind. This is an important part of the piece. We don't have any other elements. We just have this spectral, multiphonic, and glissandi. And that sets it up for being used with more standard playing, which happens at rehearsal D. So here we have the glissando followed by sort of this more standard melodic playing, and then it's interrupted again by the glissando. And then we further incorporate more techniques by adding the slap tongue back in. So you'll notice that I only incorporate the glissando with the standard playing first, and then I develop that even further by adding the slap tongue as another technique, which leads into this raucous and rowdy section at E. And then and so again, and then you'll notice here I don't have the irrational meter in this section at D in this section at D at all. So I'm slowly integrating these things together. So I've just had the spectral multiphonic and glissandi, then I'm adding standard playing with the spectral multiphonic, then the slap tongue, and now I'm adding back in the irrational meter, but now it's faster. So instead of it being on sextuplets or quarter note triplets, now it's regular triplets. So now it's a measure of 4/12, and then 5/12, and 2/12, and 7/12. And so this is just supposed to be a very wild, rambunctious kind of section. I'm using the whole range of the instrument, high altissimo, low shallow, everything in between. And then that goes into the section at rehearsal F, which is has the subtitle dwindling down. So now we're starting to lower the subdivision that we're using. So here on this page, we're only using 12th notes as our subdivision in our irrational meters. So 4/12, 5/12, 2/12, etc. So now we're going down to 10th notes, which are just eighth note quintuplets. So we have this quintuplet here. And so we're essentially going from 6 to 5 or 12 to 10. And then we're further going down to 9. So dividing the whole note into 9 equal parts. So this 9/8 tuplet. And then we keep going further, going from 9 to 7. So now dividing the whole note into 7 equal parts and having that be the subdivision. And then going to back to sixth notes or quarter note triplets, and then finally to quintuplets or quarter note quintuplets. And then again, finally, and then we're also again ending on the spectral multiphonic. It's a really good phrase ender, I find, because when you just have a low note, even if you play it loud, it is a pretty strong ending, but the added overtones that you get with the multiphonic just intensifies it a little bit, I find. So that's why I like using that as a phrase ending. Oh, and then so I forgot to mention too, back at C, that's where we have this 33 RPM, quarter note equals 88. So 120 to 88 is exactly equal to 45 to 33. So I've kept the ratios the same. So now we've dwindled down. So now we're at 16 RPM, which is a very rare speed, but you will see it with older records. And we can just think about this as maybe we're starting up the record again. So it's starting at 16, and then we're slowly accelerating to 33 to 44. And so that's what's happening throughout this section at G, is that we have these sort of disjointed sort of figures. We have these low C's with these clarion and upper clarion altissimo figures. So we have these contrasting motives that just keep going on. So then we go from 16 to 33 to 45, and then I push the tempo a little bit more. So as a tempo marking, I just say it's 45 RPM, but the motor's running a little fast. So which happens too. Sometimes, your motor speeds can vary, and that's something that you have to fix if you have, or have someone else fix for you if you have a turntable and you have that issue. So now we go from 120 to 144, and that's just to kind of pump up the intensity a little bit more. And so I have this sort of ascending mode, and so I use this ascending 16th note motive here at the end from 159 into 160. And of course, I'm playing a little bit slower. I'm not quite warmed up. And so I'm, again, just sort of repeating that motive and just raising it. So here we're just going up a fifth each time. And so this high A here goes into this sort of the climax of the piece where I tell the performer to repeat this section for an uncomfortable amount of time. So we can think of this as it's skipping and it's looping back and it's just stuck. It could be a locked groove, it could be just an issue where it just keeps going back. And so I have them play it for an uncomfortable amount of time. And the way I approach this as a performer is I repeat it until I'm uncomfortable, and then to really drive home that it's uncomfortable to the audience, I'll repeat it a few more times after I think it's uncomfortable. And so now we're still accelerating. So now here we're at 45, but now it's half note equals 120, but it's still essentially, we can think of it like it's cut time. And then again here with this repeated thing, again, that's more skipping kind of going on. We're sort of, da 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 da. So that sort of is meant to represent a skip. And then finally slowing down with this. Now we're back at 33 RPM. And then finally, again, this spectral multiphonic and glissando, followed by a slap tongue to end the piece. And so again, the slap tongue is a nice, solid, clear ending, very articulate. So that is again why I chose to end the piece that way. I think it's a really strong ending. So that is how I composed Like a Broken Record. Let me know if you'd like other videos like this in this format. If you want to look through my website, that'll be linked in the description to look at other pieces that maybe you want to see what I was thinking and how I went about composing the piece. So this is something I wanted to try with the upcoming conference and festival performances of the work. If you'd like to listen to the work on its own, I have that in a recording, a live performance, and a score video, which is uploaded in tandem with this video. So if you'd like to watch any of those will be you can find that on my channel or just linked over here to the left or right, wherever YouTube decides to put the card. Again, let me know if you want to see any videos like this. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If you want to see more content like this, I have another piece that is about to be premiered that I'd like to make a similar video to, but I want to let the piece be premiered and kind of let it have some performances, and I want the piece to exist for a couple years, just like this piece has now existed for a couple years I before I make a video on that piece. But if you see any other pieces of my catalog that you'd like me to do a video on, again, look through my website and comment below or shoot me an email, and we'll see what I can do. So I'll see you next time. Take care.